For more than 2 decades, Jerry Cantrell lived with a silence that fans filled with rumors. Some believed he walked away. Others claimed there was anger, distance, or even betrayal at the end. But grief does not always speak loudly, and truth does not always arrive on time. Now, at 58, Cantrell finally addresses what really stood between him and Layne Staley, and what never did. This is not a story about scandal. It is about love, loss, and the weight of surviving someone you were never meant to outlive. Where the rumors began. The rumors did not begin with death. They began with absence. By the late 90s, Alice in Chains was already slipping into silence. After their final tour dates, Layne Staley stopped appearing in public. Interviews were canceled. Performances disappeared. To fans, the band seemed frozen in time, and that vacuum invited speculation. Many assumed something had broken between Layne and Jerry, because it was easier to believe in conflict than to face the slow violence of addiction. Their creative bond had once felt inseparable. Throughout the early 90s, Cantrell and Staley were spoken of as a modern counterpart to legendary songwriting duos, two voices locked in harmony, tension, and mutual dependence. Songs built on layered vocals and emotional confrontation became their signature. When that voice vanished, people looked for someone to blame. The first major crack in public perception appeared during the recording sessions for Get Born Again and Died in the fall of 1998 at Sunset Sound in Los Angeles. According to multiple studio accounts later reported by Music Press, Staley arrived late, visibly unwell, struggling to focus. His voice, once precise and ferocious, came in fragments. Cantrell, known for discipline and structure, reportedly lost his composure during one session and walked out. That moment became myth. Over the years, it was retold as proof that Cantrell had reached his limit, that he had abandoned his friend when things became unbearable. The truth was far less dramatic and far more painful. At the time, Alice in Chains was no longer functioning as a touring band. Cantrell was carrying the weight of unfinished music, financial responsibility, and the quiet terror of watching someone disappear while still alive. When Cantrell released his solo album Boggy Depot in 1998, many interpreted it as a clean break. In reality, it was a pause forced by circumstance. Layne was not capable of working consistently, and the band could not move forward without him. But the public saw motion and assumed separation. What fans did not see were the phone calls that went unanswered, the doors that stayed closed, and the growing understanding that love does not grant control. The rumors gained momentum because Cantrell refused to correct them. Silence, in the music world, is often mistaken for guilt. In the years that followed, every unanswered question hardened into a theory. And when Layne Staley was found dead in his Seattle apartment, the narrative shifted from confusion to accusation. Could Jerry have done more? Did he walk away? Or was there something he never wanted known? The truth, as Cantrell would later explain, was not hidden. It was simply unbearable to say out loud. I did everything I could. Long before the world began asking whether Jerry Cantrell had done enough, he had already asked himself that question every single day. By the mid-90s, Layne Staley's addiction was no longer hidden behind rumor or denial. It had become physical, visible, and relentless. Jerry was not watching this from a distance. He was inside it. He drove Layne to treatment centers. He waited in cars. He paid for programs. He sat through conversations that ended in silence or anger. On August 8th, he personally took Layne to a rehabilitation facility in Portland, hoping distance and structure might interrupt the spiral. Layne escaped within days. This pattern repeated itself in different forms. Before the MTV Unplugged performance, Jerry rented a nearby apartment in New York so he could check on Layne constantly. He called, he knocked, he waited. Layne still found a way to disappear and return just in time to perform. That night on stage, the audience saw something haunting and historic. Behind the scenes, Jerry saw something terrifying. A man barely holding himself together, powered by will alone. What fans remember as a beautiful, fragile performance was, for Cantrell, an emotional contradiction. It was proof that Layne was still there, and evidence of how close he was to being gone. In later interviews, Jerry would describe the hardest part not as frustration, but helplessness. Addiction, he learned, does not respond to loyalty. It does not soften because of friendship. You can show up, but you cannot choose for someone else. That realization came slowly, and it came with guilt that never fully disappeared. In July of 1997, Jerry stood outside Layne's apartment with Layne's mother. They brought food. They brought pamphlets. They knocked for hours. When Layne finally answered through the door, it was not gratitude that came back. It was refusal. He did not want to be saved. And that truth, more than any rumor, shattered Jerry. Years later, when asked whether he ever felt responsible, Cantrell did not deny the weight. He simply explained that responsibility has limits. He loved Layne. He stayed. He tried. But he could not replace the choice Layne would not make. This is the part of the story that rarely fits into headlines. There is no dramatic betrayal here, no sudden abandonment, only exhaustion, fear, and the slow acceptance that being present does not guarantee an outcome. When Layne stopped returning calls, Jerry kept dialing. When the door stayed closed, he kept knocking. And when silence became permanent, he carried it with him. The rumors say Jerry walked away. The truth is more brutal. He stayed until there was nowhere left to stand. The things he never shared. After Layne Staley was gone, the questions did not stop. In fact, they grew louder. Among all the rumors that followed his death, one refused to fade. The story claimed that Layne had recorded something near the end, a final piece of music meant only for Jerry Cantrell, a demo, a cassette, a goodbye never released. It circulated in fragments, passed from studio assistants to fans, from message boards to late-night radio shows, growing more detailed with every retelling. According to one account, Layne entered a Seattle studio late at night, pale and shaking, carrying an old acoustic guitar. He recorded a short song in a single take, left it behind, and asked that it be sent to Jerry. No label, no date, just a voice and a melody. The idea was irresistible to fans desperate for closure. Jerry Cantrell never denied that Layne left things behind, but he refused to turn private memory into public evidence. When asked directly years later, Cantrell's answer was measured and final. There were things he would never reveal, he said, because they belonged to him and Layne alone, not to the internet, not to history, not to speculation. For many, that silence felt like confirmation. For Jerry, it was protection. What he did confirm was smaller and somehow heavier. Layne had left voicemails, short musical ideas, fragments of thought. One message included a brief riff and a simple line. "I think you're going to like this." Jerry kept that recording locked away, not as a relic, but as a voice that still spoke when the world was quiet. This refusal to share details frustrated fans who wanted answers. But it revealed something deeper about Cantrell's grief. He never treated Layne as mythology, he treated him as a person, and people are not meant to be archived for strangers. At the same time, the rumors of conflict continued to resurface. Stories from late recording sessions were retold as proof of resentment. Jerry addressed those moments carefully. He admitted to anger, but not at Layne. He was angry at the disease that was destroying someone he loved, turning creativity into labor and presence into absence. In his words, he was never mad at Layne. He was mad at what was killing him. From late 2001 into early 2002, Jerry called Layne almost every day. Most times, the phone rang until it stopped. Once, Layne answered. His voice was weak, distant, but familiar. He told Jerry not to worry, that he was fine. Jerry knew it wasn't true. But he also knew there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said. This is where the rumors collapse under their own weight. There was no secret feud, no final argument, no dramatic cutoff, just unfinished conversations and memories Jerry chose not to sell. Silence, in this case, was not avoidance. It was loyalty. The day. Everything stopped. On an April morning in Seattle, the waiting ended. Layne Staley was found alone in his apartment after weeks of silence. The details were clinical. The impact was not. For Jerry Cantrell, the moment did not arrive with shock or disbelief. It arrived with confirmation, the kind that settles into the body slowly, like gravity, leaving no room to argue with reality. He did not rush to microphones. He did not issue statements filled with explanations. Jerry disappeared, not because he had nothing to say, but because anything said too quickly would have been false. Grief, for him, was not dramatic. It was quiet, heavy, and private. In later reflections, Cantrell described that period as losing two things at once: his closest friend and the band that had defined his adult life. Alice in Chains was not just a job, it was a shared language built over years of harmony, tension, and trust. Without Layne, that language felt incomplete. Continuing immediately would have felt dishonest. What followed was not closure, but survival. Jerry returned to work because that was the only way he knew how to stay upright. Music became less about ambition and more about endurance. He was no longer writing toward a future that included Layne. He was riding around an absence that would never be filled. One song, written quietly and without intention of performance, carried the weight he could not articulate. It was not composed for charts or radio. It was written as a farewell. When it eventually emerged years later, it did not sound like grief processed. It sounded like grief preserved. People assumed time would soften the loss. It did not. What time changed was Jerry's relationship to it. He stopped fighting the questions and started accepting that some answers would never arrive. Layne did not leave explanations behind. He left memories. Performing old songs became complicated. Each lyric carried a double meaning. What once felt confrontational now felt prophetic. Jerry did not stop playing them. He reframed them. Each performance became both a goodbye and a thank you, a way to honor what existed without pretending it still did. In rare interviews, Cantrell admitted what fans sensed but rarely heard stated plainly. He missed Layne terribly, not in a distant, respectful way, but in the daily sense of absence. The missing phone call, the voice that once completed his melodies, the person who understood the space between notes without explanation. Surviving someone you love carries its own form of guilt. Jerry never denied that weight. He carried it openly, without dramatizing it, without turning it into narrative. He did not claim peace. He claimed responsibility, to remember honestly. The rumors asked whether he moved on too quickly or not enough. Jerry rejected both. He did not move on. He moved forward, with Layne still present in the work, the choices, and the silence between them. What he finally confirmed. When people say Jerry Cantrell finally confirmed the rumors, they often expect a revelation, a hidden conflict, a last argument, a confession that rewrites everything. What they miss is that Cantrell never believed the truth needed drama to be valid. In recent years, when asked directly about his relationship with Layne Staley, Jerry did not dismantle rumors one by one. He did something far more definitive. He reframed them. He explained that he and Layne were never mirrors of each other. They shared musical instincts, especially harmony, but they were deeply individual people. Their bond was not built on sameness. It was built on tension, contrast, and mutual respect. That difference was not a fracture. It was the source of their sound. Cantrell acknowledged the late years were painful. He confirmed that there were moments of frustration, exhaustion, and fear, but he made one point unmistakably clear. There was never abandonment. What people interpreted as distance was, in reality, the limit of what one human being could do for another without crossing into control. He admitted that some stories were true in spirit, but distorted in scale. Yes, there were difficult studio sessions. Yes, Layne struggled to show up. Yes, there were moments when work stopped because addiction had taken over. But Cantrell rejected the idea that these moments defined their relationship. They were symptoms, not the cause. Most importantly, Jerry confirmed something fans had long debated. He never stopped carrying Layne with him creatively. Even in solo work, even in new eras of the band, Layne's presence remained part of the process. Not as imitation, not as replacement, but as tradition. That word mattered. Cantrell described what they created together as a shared language, one that did not end with death. Continuing to write, perform, and evolve was not moving on from Layne. It was moving with him. That was the confirmation fans had missed all along. There was no secret feud, no final rupture, no buried truth waiting to be exposed. The reality was quieter and heavier. Two people built something honest. One could not survive his illness. The other survived carrying the weight of both. At 58, Jerry Cantrell did not confirm rumors by answering them. He confirmed them by dissolving them, by showing that love does not always look like rescue and loyalty does not always look like proximity. What he confirmed, finally, was this: Layne Staley was never left behind. So after everything you've heard, do you think Jerry Cantrell stayed silent to protect the truth, or because the truth was too personal to share? Let us know what stands out to you most about their bond. If you appreciate honest stories behind legendary music, like the video, subscribe and turn on notifications.